Hey everybody, before we get into Hellsing, I need to let you guys know about the sponsor for this video, Abridged. I'm not gonna lie, I have a pretty nice computer. I got 64 gigabytes of RAM, and before I started using Abridged, a lot of that was being taken up by bloated internet browsers. So if you were going to imagine a browser that is not only functional, but phenomenal, that's Abridged. And since we started working with them, I use it as my daily browser, and I think that's about as good as a promotion as you can get. It works extremely well for the things that I need it to, it doesn't clog up my computer, and it's actually making my streams way more manageable. On top of that, it has anime-inspired customization. You can tailor your browsing world with themes, wallpapers, sound effects. Turn on what you want, turn off what you don't, and you can make your browser uniquely yours. And I know, if you're a computer person, you love to have the LEDs. Make sure that your web browser matches you as well. If you need quick answers, Abridged has new AI integration that puts ChatGPT and Sonic Chat at your fingertips on the sidebar. Multitasking is a breeze with the video pop-out feature. I love this one because I need to watch video while I'm working all the time. Plus, all your favorite tools and apps are just a click away in the sidebar as well, and switching to Abridged is seamless with their quick import function. This was huge. Your passwords, everything that you need, just brought right over to it. All you got to do is click settings, synchronization, import bookmarks and settings, and you are good to go instantaneously. I made the switch. I haven't looked back. It's not just better. Abridged is the best. But you don't have to take my word for it. You can download Abridged for free using my link below and experience a browser that's literally better at everything. Promise you're not going to regret it. I sure as hell haven't. Thank you once again, Abridged, for paying for our editors. Now let's get into Hellsing. In the realm of supernatural horror, Hellsing stands alone in its complete lunacy. Nazi vampires invading London with zeppelins, a centuries-old Dracula fighting for the British crown, a police girl turned bloodsucker wrestling with the morality of her new powers, and at the center of it all, a war-obsessed cyborg pulling the strings of power. Welcome, friends, to the blood-soaked, bullet-riddled world of Hellsing, a manga where the line between monster and hero blurs faster than you can say release restraint level 0. And this is definitely your older brother's vampire story, alright? There's no twinkly boys, there's no weird dog guys trying to imprint on babies. No, this is vampires, my friend. That being said, Hellsing takes everything that you think you know about the undead, tosses it into a blender with a healthy dose of insanity, and serves it up with a hot side of religious conflict and philosophical musings about the nature of humanity. From an organization sworn to protect the crown against supernatural threats, to Vatican assassins with regenerative powers, to the last vestiges of the Third Reich hell-bent on engulfing the world in eternal war, Hellsing's story is a roller coaster that only gets wilder with each turn. It is a whirlwind of body horror, gore, and macabre that engulfs the reader in a story of violence and the supernatural in a way that no other manga has matched, except Berserk, because Berserk is the best manga ever written. But when it comes to the horror aspects, to even be able to have a conversation about another manga within that category, especially it being Hellsing, that's very impressive. The manga is in a league unto itself. And on top of it all, it features one of the most badass vampires of all time, Alucard. Is it Castlevania's Alucard? No, but this one is interesting all by himself. Devilishly debonair and mercilessly OP, Alucard is a concoction of narcissism and cockiness draped in a red Victorian duster and a wide, floppy-brimmed fedora. And in the age of internet fedoras, he still manages to pull it off. I don't know how he does it. So, clench your butts, because we're about to plunge into a gore-drenched realm where vampires wrestle with their conscience and humans embrace the abyss. And as the lines blur and sanity shatters, you'll be left questioning everything you thought you knew about the laws of good and evil. Are you ready to face the terrifying truth of who the real monsters are? This is the insane story of Hellsing. Let's get into it. Hellsing is set in a version of modern-day England where supernatural threats, particularly vampires, are real but largely unknown, at least to the general public. But that being said, they're not the only spooky-dooky entities that exist here. You got werewolves, you got ghouls, and the vampires might have a couple more powers than you're used to them having. Hellsing's story revolves around the Hellsing organization, which is a bit redundant. It's an acronym that stands for Her Royal English Legions of Legitimate Supernatural and Immortal Knight Guard. It's one of those names names you know they made up just to fit the acronym. But Hellsing is a secret agency tasked with protecting the country from otherworldly menaces, and it's not exactly part of the government as far as I can tell. Hellsing has basically no official oversight, but it is often contracted by England's government in order to handle paranormal instances. It's also funded by the Convention of 12, which is a secret society based on the Round Table Council that is made up of prominent leaders of England. It's a cabal, man. They're hiding the secrets from us. We're talking politicians, military leaders, nobles, economic heavyweights, small group of powerful people that run England behind the scenes. And they're all loyal to the Queen, who we all know is a dead lizard. So, like I said, while the Hellsing organization doesn't answer to England's actual government, it does report to the Queen and this convention. The organization is led by Sir Integra Fairbrook Wingates Hellsing, the only remaining descendant of Abraham Van Helsing, the vampire hunter. Maybe it's pronounced Von. I don't care. So the plot opens up in a very typical way when we're discussing religions, aka a priest is touching people in inappropriate ways. And like most priests, this one is a vampire who is settled in the town of Cheddar, and suddenly people have started disappearing. Even the police that are investigating the disappearances aren't returning after visiting the priest, so it's time for more extreme measures. Quick side note, Cheddar is actually a real town in England, and naturally you'd expect them to have a lot of cheese, but apparently there's like only one factory there that's still left making real cheddar cheese, and that's just sad. Great one out for Cheddar, guys. Anyway, the local police are overwhelmed because when it comes to vampires, bullets cannot harm them. Plus, the vicar vampire is turning his victims into ghouls, basically zombies, but with slightly more brain power and completely controlled by their vampire creator. In the Hellsing universe, only a virgin of the opposite sex of the sire can be turned into a new vampire. All other victims just get turned into ghouls. So this vicar is basically creating a small army of undead policemen at his disposal, and this is the exact type of situation the Hellsing organization remedies. In the truest sense of fight fire with fire, Integra Hellsing really only has one solution to supernatural problems: Alucard. Fight vampire with vampire. And this is where we get to first meet him, looking all cool, being all badass. He confronts the vicar and gets completely blasted full of bullets by the vampire's ghouls. But like I said, ordinary guns have no lasting effect on a vampire. The key word here is being ordinary. So Alucard takes out his big ass gun, starts blowing heads off, ripping holes in people. Because this thing is equipped with 13mm explosive steel rounds alloyed with silver melted from a Lanchester cathedral cross. Basically, he's doing holy damage, and it's super effective. So with Alucard's gun pointed at his face, the priest takes the only remaining policewoman hostage before he can shoot, and shields his body with hers. And this lady is Seras Victoria, a girl who's about to have her entire life turned upside down. So now we got a life or death hostage situation, but Alucard completely ignores it. Instead, he addresses the girl and asks one simple question, and I quote, "Hey girl, you a virgin?" That's how I like to open up dialogue with people too. And because it's anime, she of course answers yes, because of course she does. How are weirdos going to fetishize her if she's not? And like a real player pimp, Alucard shoots her directly in the lung. This of course hits the vampire behind her, and as the vampire dies, the girl lays bleeding out on the floor. Alucard then gives her a choice. She can either die or become a vampire. And in the next scene, Alucard is carrying her back in his arms while claiming there were no survivors, aka she's dead. AKA, she's a vampire now. See what he did there? Because vampires are undead. So he killed one vampire and made another, and you can tell that Integra doesn't know what to do with that info just by the look on her face here. Alucard is a wild card. He's useful, but very unpredictable. Now let's take a beat here, because this decision gives us some perspective on how Alucard tends to act. Because for the rest of the manga, he's going to tell Seras that she chose to be a vampire, and for her to stop being dumb and start doing some vampire stuff. However, her choice can kind of be picked apart a little bit, mostly because Alucard shot her before she even knew what her choice would mean in the future. And in that moment, the choice was be a vampire or die, which I think most of us would choose not die, which doesn't make it much of a choice, especially being under duress. Alucard made the choice the second she admitted that she hadn't done the old in out. And we haven't seen Alucard's powers just yet, but he definitely absolutely could have killed that vampire without hurting Seras at all. He made that choice for Seras and continues to dangle that in front of her for the rest of the story. I mean, he is a monster. The point is, Alucard may be on the side of humanity in this fight, but I wouldn't necessarily consider him a protagonist. Anti-hero definitely feels much closer to his role. He just finds humans interesting, so toying with them is basically the same as a cat playing with a mouse. Actually, that's a very good analogy, because cats really enjoy murdering things. That's science, man, look it up. And like a cat, he's doing it for enjoyment and because it keeps things interesting, and we'll see him continue to push people's buttons, specifically Integra's, throughout the entire story. So speaking of Integra, we should delve into her backstory too, because it's not every day the leader of a secret organization has control over an ancient vampire. So 10 years before this, Arthur Hellsing, the previous leader of the Hellsing organization and Integra's father, died. Before his death, he made Integra the new leader of Hellsing. She's 12 here, by the way, so he's handing command of the agency that protects all of England from the supernatural to a 12-year-old girl. Gotta love that nepotism, man. Anyway, Arthur's brother, Richard, didn't really appreciate getting passed over for the command, and 3 days later, he's hunting down Integra to kill her. Yes, he wants to kill a 12-year-old girl so he can take over the organization for himself. But Integra ends up hiding underground in the Forgotten Dungeon, where her father told her, "There lies one of the fruits of the Hellsing family's labors. It will be your protection," unquote. However, Integra only finds a dried up corpse staked to the wall. And even worse, her uncle finds her there and shoots her, but just grazes her arm. But it turns out that was actually on purpose because he's a sadistic dickhead and wants to make her suffer for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, it's not like Integra was asked if she wanted to be a part of this. It was just kind of forced on her. Why you gotta be so rude? Anyway, that arm shot splatters Integra's blood on this staked up corpse, which suddenly wakes up and licks the remaining blood off the ground. Ohayou gozaimasu Alucard. In a matter of seconds, he's sliced the heads off of all of Richard's men and pledged his service to Integra. She takes her role as the family's head, shoots her uncle, for good measure, and the monster and the girl have worked together killing vampires ever since. Now you might wonder why Alucard would serve the Von Helsing family after getting his shit pushed in by Abraham, and I'm wondering too because it's never actually explained properly in the manga. But I do think there's a few reasons that align with Alucard's personality. First, because it's anime and he respects Abraham for beating him, despite only being a man armed with knowledge. And later in the series, Alucard states that only a man can kill a monster, and I think that's coming from his personal experience with Abraham, so he continues to serve people in the Helsing family that have the same personality traits as Abraham, or maybe I should say strength of personality. There's also a series of interviews with mangaka Kota Hirono called the Hellsing Official Guidebook, which goes into more detail about how Van Helsing saved Alucard's life, so Alucard in turn pledged loyalty to the Helsing family, which if you need a guidebook to a manga, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Maybe you shouldn't have been lazy and actually put that in the book. And on top of it, these interviews were never translated into English, at least not officially. So it's difficult to actually find the specific interview question and answer that shows this, but I was able to find one of the interviews translated through the Wayback Machine. Unfortunately, it didn't have that specific question and answer. But second, the Helsing family has done experimentation on Alucard, creating magical levels of restraints that close off different sections of his power, and he must have consent from the Helsing family to access them, specifically the final level of restraints that give him his full power. And honestly, I think he actually enjoys having his power restrained for the same reason he enjoys toying with humans. I mean, the dude is bored. He's lived for 500 years and is so OP, he's basically unbeatable. Having all these binds and chains on him makes things interesting. And as I'm reading this, I'm starting to realize how many kinks are in this manga. But I also think this goes along with why Alucard basically always lets his opponents hit him first. He's giving them a chance and purposefully making the fight more difficult on himself because he likes it. And I think that's what he cares about the most. Just having fun. Look at him. He's a fun guy. It also explains why he randomly decided to turn Seras. Having a fledgling vampire is going to make life more engaging for a while. Teaching a new vampire how to be vampire-y is another type of challenge he can't just bowl through easily. And all of this sets the stage for Seras' character development throughout the series, and as a fledgling vampire, she struggles with her new nature and identity and continues to refuse to drink blood while grappling with that lost humanity. Now, one of the interesting things is that fledgling vampires have to obey their sires. Commands are not dismissible. Alucard could easily force her to drink blood, but he doesn't. He's purposefully teaching her what it means to be a vampire and why she should drink blood, but continuing to give her the space to make the decisions to take that crimson dive when she's ready. And it's not for lack of encouragement. Both Alucard and Integra are pretty insistent that Seras should just start drinking blood to develop her best vampiric self, and she's doing no one any favors trying to hold on to that humanity that she loves so much. But instead of getting her super boost, she slowly starts learning how to use and manage her vampiric powers without drinking blood. But this theme of temptation is going to follow her throughout this entire manga. And it does end up forming a significant subplot that isn't finalized until her last fight at the end of the manga. Her journey from a naive, uncertain new vampire to a powerful and confident being forms the basis of character growth in the series, because it turns out that 500-year-old vampires don't actually change that much. Homeboy is actually a vampire boomer. That's not to say that Alucard doesn't change at all, and we'll get to his character stuff a little later on. So back to the storyline, right? After the incident in Cheddar, the Hellsing organization faces increasingly difficult challenges like a rival organization, the Vatican Section 13 Iscariot, who has their own trump card vampire hunter in play, known as the fanatical Father Alexander Anderson. Mr. Anderson. This guy is a knife and sword enthusiast with regeneration abilities and becomes Alucard's primary rival and foil throughout the series. He's also fucking insane, giving absolutely no shits to the treaty set between Hellsing and the Vatican that drew up each group's hunting territory. For him, a vampire is a vampire and they all deserve to die. He's also really fucking annoying to read dialogue from. He's portrayed with a heavy Scottish accent, which is great for the anime, but it's a nightmare to try and read the phonetical spelling in the manga. For example, Eddie Uno's lines looks like this, which translates to every one of his lines looks like this, And when these two vampire hunter behemoths meet, Alucard shoots Anderson in the face and Anderson cuts Alucard's head clean off. And it's pretty early in, and this kind of stuff just escalates. The fact that they can both survive each other's attacks like it's nothing really shows just how high a cut above the rest these two are. Realizing there's no way he can kill Alucard with his current weapon arsenal, Anderson bows out until they can fight at a later date. Now, the reason Section 13 and Hellsing are crossing paths at all is due to the massive and unexplainable uptick in vampire incidents. Not only are there tons of incidents, but all of them are the weakest vampires the Hellsing organization has seen. You see, vampires live forever, so you'd expect at least some of these guys to have some supernatural powers, healing abilities, transformation abilities, to become a bat or a wolf or something, but these guys are different. Not only are they weak, they all have these brain chips inside of them, almost as if these vampires are being artificially created on an assembly line. Integra presents her findings to the Convention of 12, showing the chips they found in the vampires, explaining how they're being controlled through these chips. Another oddity is that every victim has turned into a ghoul, including young boys and girls, people who should obviously not be having marital relations, hopefully. So this is weird, and Integra is explaining that with this many victims, statistically, someone would have been turned into a vampire, but none of them have. Historically, ghouls are also destroyed when the master vampire is killed, but in these incidents, the ghouls continue on even if the vampire has been dispatched. It's obvious someone is behind these incidents and manufacturing these freak vampires. And while Integra is explaining her findings to the 12, we also get introduced to Walter C. Dornez, Integra's elderly but extremely capable butler and retainer. He's like Kato, but not Kato, because Kato is way cooler than this guy. Walter, known as the Angel of Death in his youth, serves as both a father figure to Integra and a valuable asset to the organization. He's also just cool. He's got that uptight butler demeanor, but with just a hint of sadism that really gets turned up when he has to fight somebody. Just a dope character all around and very integral to the plot later on. But now it's time to buckle up, kiddies, because this is where things start to get wild. Remember those weird-ass vampire chips? Well, it turns out they are just the tip of the iceberg of batshit crazy that is about to rain down on London. Enter stage left, the Millennium organization. The bad actors behind these synthetic vampires. Millennium is basically what you get if you threw the Third Reich, vampire fetishists, and doomsday preppers into a blender and hit puree. They're a group of Nazi remnants who have been hiding out since World War II, led by a guy simply known as the Major. And let me tell you, this guy makes little mustache man look like a well-adjusted individual. The Major is to war what a chocoholic is to Willy Wonka's factory, my friends. He is not interested in world domination or any of that cliche villain crap. This guy just wants to create an endless state of war for his own enjoyment. He's literally trying to speedrun the most fucked up villain category. I mean, even the Joker is just after Gotham. The Major has ambitions. So let's meet the rest of this circus of horrors, right? First, we got the Doctor. This guy is the brains behind Millennium's vampire tech. Think Dr. Frankenstein, but with less moral compass and more Nazi paraphernalia. Oh wait, that's Joseph Mengele. Then there's the Captain, silent, stoic, werewolf. He's basically what you'd get if you crossed Wolverine with a German Shepherd and took away his personality. Oh wait, that's Sabretooth. Schrodinger is next on our list of what the fuck is that? He's a cat boy, specifically a Nazi cat boy with quantum physical properties, a werecat, if you will. He can be everywhere and nowhere at once, and that's his supernatural power. He's literally Schrodinger's cat if you didn't know whether or not a Nazi was dead inside a box. We also got Rip Van Winkle, which I have trouble saying without laughing. He's a sharpshooter vampire with a magical musket that can basically be used like a handheld anti-aircraft gun. And let's not forget Zoran Blitz, a vampire covered in tattoos with the power to create illusions. And most of these guys have limited roles in the manga, minor sections where they step up to get their asses handed to them by Alucard eventually, or Seras sometimes. It's really only the Major and Schrodinger that hold importance throughout the entire series, so don't worry if you already forgot half of those German names. I did too, and I had to look it all up again. Now I gotta point out that there's a lot of back and forth between Hellsing and Millennium in the middle of this manga. Millennium attacks the Convention of 12, Hellsing has to begrudgingly meet with Section 13 to get more information on Millennium. Alucard and Seras are shipped to Argentina to gather more information, only to get declared as terrorists and attacked by the military. The whole thing is just a ploy by Millennium to test what does and doesn't work on Alucard. They're trying to find a hole in his armor, essentially, something they could use to exploit, an unkillable vampire. But Alucard ends up killing a shitload of military personnel in the process, including a playing card throwing vampire, while both Integra and Millennium watch via TV. And honestly, I'm basically skimming over a good amount of content here for time and brevity because the details just aren't that important to the overall plot. If you want to be a completionist, read it. I don't know what to tell you. The point is, each and every battle moving forward is bringing Hellsing and Millennium closer to an all-out war. Millennium is being sneaky and hiding their true identities, testing what Hellsing and Alucard are capable of and how they can possibly be beaten. Now, all that being said, Millennium isn't content with just chilling in the shadows. Oh no. These vampire freaks they've been creating are all just experimentation testing for their master plan: invade and destroy London. There's a lot of jokes that can be made here given the current political climate of that island, but I'm not gonna make them. Millennium decides to announce their presence to the world in true supervillain fashion by attacking and commandeering a British aircraft carrier, and they do it using vampire-controlled zeppelins, because of course they do. I mean, really, what is cooler than a zeppelin? Now that might not seem like a big deal, right? They steal one ship, so what? But actually, it's a huge fucking deal. You have to understand, aircraft carriers are insanely expensive military equipment, right? The US has 11 aircraft carriers total, and that represents 40% of the world's total aircraft carriers. The UK has 2. Also, in World War II in the Pacific specifically, aircraft carriers won the war. So taking one is a massive declaration of war. This attack is basically Millennium's way of saying, hey world, we're back and you're fucked. The British military has no ability to recover the carrier, they can't contend with vampires, so Alucard gets sent in to deal with this floating nightmare of death, and in the process faces off against Rip Van Winkle in a battle that's so over the top, it makes Michael Bay movies look subtle. So thanks to Rip Van Winkle's musket that acts like that anti-aircraft gun I told you about in the beginning and you already forgot, the military can't even get close without being shot down. So instead of trying to fly or boat Alucard in, they get him a goddamn Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird, which you think could easily be used to knock out all of those Zeppelins, but let's not think. This Blackbird isn't just some regular military plane, okay? It is a long-range, high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft. This thing can fly faster at a higher altitude than a U-2 spy plane, just for context. We're talking speeds of over Mach 3 and more than 85,000 feet. Flying this thing makes you basically invulnerable to any enemy due to the speed and height. You're 16 miles in the air, which is high enough that it actually looks like you're flying in space, and they gave one to Alucard. Yeah, so guess what he does with it? At Mach 3, he nosedives this thing straight down into the aircraft carrier, which is still a more appropriate allocation of funds than sending billions of dollars to apartheid Israel. Thought I wasn't gonna do it, but I did it. But in doing so, Alucard splits the aircraft carrier in two, and there is not a damn thing that Van Winkle or anyone else can do about it. There's just one small problem though. This is exactly what the Major wanted Alucard to do. The plane is destroyed, the aircraft carrier is destroyed, Alucard is essentially stranded in the middle of the ocean now. For those that don't know, vampires have historically been unable to cross running water, and even oceans can be difficult unless they are in their coffins. However, Alucard isn't just a normal vampire, and if you know the story of Dracula and the Demeter, you know this certainly is not Alucard's first time aboard a ship on the ocean. It's not directly explained why he can't just turn into bats and fly back, or if he's technically stranded on the ship, or whether he just decides to take his sweet time and make a grand entrance, but Alucard morphs his body, creating essentially a ghost ship from what's left of the aircraft carrier and uses it to get back to London. One of the interesting things about Hellsing is that they really do include all of like the legit vampire lore, but then they also throw it away because Alucard can do anything. Regardless, this trip is going to take some time which is desperately needed with Alucard on the bench. When you have a character that ridiculously OP, it can be difficult to create tension for your final arc of the story. Dragon Ball Z does this with Goku in literally every arc. By removing Alucard for a bit, Hellsing becomes far more intense because now there's no guarantee the Hellsing organization will survive. So while Alucard is out of commission, Millennium has started their assault on London, the Zeppelins are inbound, and Nazi vampires are killing the British by the thousands, many of them getting turned into ghouls and creating more havoc after their deaths. I will say though, you don't see any of those ghouls complaining about brown people, so maybe it's for the better. Thought I wasn't gonna do it, but I did it. Meanwhile, the Vatican is sitting there like a kid who wasn't invited to the party, watching Hellsing and Millennium duke it out. But don't worry, they're not about to let a good war go to waste. Enrico Maxwell, who we have not talked about, the leader of Iscariot, sees this as the perfect opportunity to eliminate both Hellsing and Millennium, which honestly is a legitimate war tactic. He leads a massive crusade into London because apparently what the situation really needed was more religious zealots with weapons. So now we have a three-way battle royale between the Vatican, Hellsing, and Millennium, with London being the unfortunate boxing ring. And in the middle of all this chaos, we got our girl Integra, who is trying to save her country while navigating a political and military situation that's about as stable as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. With Alucard out of the picture momentarily, Millennium's troops target the Hellsing estate, which has been solely guarded by Seras and a band of mercenaries Integra hired after Millennium attacked the Convention of 12. And this is where Seras does the anime level up. The entire time after being reborn as a vampire, Seras has had a very timid nature. She never really embraced her vampiric nature and only once drank blood, but it was something that was ordered by Integra and it was Integra's blood. Alucard constantly calls her police girl and the mercenaries just call her girl. It's like a symbol that she's so unsure of herself she doesn't even deserve to be called by her name yet. Also maybe some mild misogyny, I don't know, but she's still walking in that twilight road between humanity and vampiric hunger. But this fight is where she finally comes into her own. Zoran and her merry band of Nazi vampires are attacking Hellsing HQ, and Seras is left to defend it with the wild geese, those mercenaries I mentioned a minute ago. Zoran, being the tattoo-covered nightmare fuel she is, uses her illusion powers to mindfuck Seras 6 ways to Sunday. We're talking full psychological warfare, my friends. Psyops, bro. Forcing Seras to relive her traumatic past. Despite being mentally and physically pummeled though, Seras refuses to give up. It's in this moment with Pip, the leader of the wild geese, dying in her arms and everything going to hell that Seras finally embraces her vampiric nature. She drinks Pip's blood, absorbs his soul, and goes full vampire queen mode. We're talking a whole new Seras, my friends, confident, powerful, royally pissed off, girl boss. She proceeds to turn Zoran into a red smear on the wall in a scene that's equal part badass and pretty terrifying. It is a turning point for her character, making her transformation from reluctant fledgling to full-fledged vampire badass. She's not just some sidekick anymore, she is a force to be reckoned with in her own right. With the battle for Hellsing HQ 1, Seras takes to the sky with her newfound abilities and beelines straight for Integra in order to guard her. So let's hit the pause button here again to talk about some parallels between Alucard and Seras. These two are the vampire versions of yin and yang throughout the plot, starting at opposite ends of the bloodsucker spectrum, but somehow ending up finding nearly the same morals down the road. Alucard kicked off this shindig as the ultimate monster. We're talking full-on, I've killed so many people I've lost count levels of vampirism. But throughout this bloody roller coaster, we've seen him develop a fascination and reverence for humanity. We'll get more into that aspect of his character during the climax, but it's safe to say he's been humbled by humanity and respects people like Abraham, for instance. And on the flip side now, we have Seras, who started this whole vampire gig as unwillingly as a cat being forced into a bathtub. It was forced onto her by Alucard, and she's been clinging onto her humanity every step of the way, despite encouragement by everybody around her. But now, she's finally embracing that inner Carmilla, dude, and holy shit, is it a sight to behold. Despite starting on opposite ends of the human to monster spectrum, they're really meeting in the middle here now. They're both trying to find that sweet spot between human and monster, like they're playing the world's most fucked up game of Goldilocks and the Three Bears. They're both wrestling with the same, can you keep your humanity when you've joined the undead club, and what the hell does being human even mean? And that question is what finally gets answered at the end of the manga. But in order to reach that point, we gotta get back to the story. And this is where things really start to get juicy. Alucard finally gets back to shore and is confronted by the Nazi captain and Anderson. The three stare each other down when suddenly Alucard yells, "My master, Integra Hellsing, your orders!" And from a rooftop overlooking the scene, Integra responds, "Destroy them all, control art restriction system level 0 released." This is the apex of Alucard's abilities finally coming to the forefront, and he doesn't just transform, he reverts back to his original form, Dracula. Everyone around desperately tries to destroy Alucard in one last attempt. They can feel something horrible is about to happen, and in an explosion of blood covering literally all of London, Alucard's shadow takes over the battlefield. The souls of each and every person he's ever devoured are joining the fight. From the recent souls like Van Winkle to the armies of Wallachia, this is the true power of Vlad the Impaler turned Count Dracula. These thousands, millions of souls at his disposal make him literally invincible and untouchable. And as Integra says, blood is the currency of the soul, the coinage of life, no more than a vehicle in the traffic of life. To suck blood is to make the whole existence of a life one's own. Alucard has countless lives, and therefore it doesn't matter how many times he dies, there's always more. This is what you read Hellsing for. These climax moments are the heart and soul of this series. There's almost no need for dialogue because the art depicts it all perfectly. Endless bodies spilling blood and impaled on spikes around him as Dracula bends his knee and bows to Integra. With the actuality of Alucard's true power on display, Father Anderson decides to take matters into his own hands. He attacks the Count, trying to find an opening, but all he manages to do is encourage Alucard's joyful insanity. With his restrictions down, Alucard can transform on command into any of his forms. He can swap between his Dracula form to parry with a broadsword and his Alucard form to shoot from long range with ease. He almost instantaneously blows Anderson's arm clear off. It's just dangling there by a thread, man. Anderson's not stupid though. Just a couple attacks into the fight, he knows he can't beat Alucard with his usual bag of bayonet tricks, so it's time to bring out the big guns. He pulls out the ultimate trump card, Helena's Nail. And for those of you who skip Sunday school, first off, good for you. Second, Helena's Nail is supposedly one of the nails used in Christ's crucifixion, and in true Hellsing fashion, stabbing yourself with it turns you into a monster of God, because nothing says holy warrior like turning yourself into an actual monster. And this is where Hellsing's themes really start to take stage. Throughout this fight, Alucard has been pushing Anderson, encouraging him to fight, taunting him to win. Anderson reminds Alucard of Abraham von Hellsing, the only person who ever defeated him, and we've seen this in his servitude to Integra, that he doesn't hold any grudge or malice that he was beaten. On the contrary, he holds the Hellsing family in the highest regard. He wants Anderson to prove the strength of human determination and will yet again. When Anderson produces the nail as his final weapon, Alucard's face falls from glee to sorrow. He tries to honestly talk Anderson out of using it because in Alucard's eyes, being a monster that accepts God is the same as being a monster who denies God. End of the day, you're both just immortal monsters. The strength of humanity comes from their ability to persevere despite overwhelming odds, despite being weak little flesh babies, to be bound by a mortal coil, strife, and limited time on Earth and still continue on accepting that you're eventually going to die. Alucard sees humanity as stronger than he is because he wasn't able to keep on living. When Alucard, as Vlad the Impaler, was finally beaten by the Turks, he drank blood off the battlefield to defy God and run away from his fear of death. He was never actually bitten in order to become a vampire. He was directly cursed by God. Alucard sees Anderson as a potential version of himself, a version that is willing to die and not afraid to face God. Being defeated by Anderson is what Alucard wants, a human to be better than he was on the verge of death. Anderson gave in to those same fears that Alucard had though, so Alucard's respect for the man vanishes in an instant. Now, he's just a monster to be defeated, the same as every other adversary Alucard has faced. Then, the story cuts back to a scene between Integra and her father as he teaches her about why those with immortality crave battle. Is it really because they want to live forever? Why do they constantly fight? Henry Hellsing believed it wasn't for eternal life or even power, but because they desire death. They wanted someone who could kill them and finally take away their endless misery. And this puts Alucard's life into perspective for us. We've skimmed over a lot of his backstory, but it's essentially to understand his character at this moment. At a young age, he was assaulted by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. When he grew up, he became a warlord, conqueror, and monarch of Wallachia, killing between 40 to 100,000 people, but eventually he lost everything when the Ottoman Empire captured him. Instead of dying, he became a vampire, consuming the blood of thousands or tens of thousands. And remember what Integra said about blood. It's the currency of the soul, the coinage of life, no more than a vehicle in the traffic of life. To suck blood is to make the whole existence of a life one's own. So how many tens of thousands of people have had their despair swallowed literally by Alucard? The guy is holding on to all of these sorrows and hate and misery. And like, of course he wants to die. This is the punishment that he got from God. Inconceivable power, unending life, but bound to servitude, tormented with experimentation, and nothing that can finally give him everlasting peace. And this is why Alucard tried so hard to stop Anderson. It was actually to save him from this misery. And honestly, I think this is great. This is a lot of depth from a story that is primarily about Nazis fighting monsters. But enough of that sappy shit, we're getting back to the battle. So Anderson goes full thorny Jesus mode and we get treated to a fight that's part philosophical debate, part Dragon Ball Z. It's Alucard, the monster who respects humanity, versus Anderson, the human who is just kind of dumb. And even with his newfound power, it is not enough to break Alucard, my friends, especially not when he's this angry. Alucard tells Anderson he wouldn't have minded losing to him 523 years ago, back when he first became a vampire, but now it's only humans who defeat monsters, and Anderson doesn't qualify anymore. He crushes the guy, ripping the needle and Anderson's heart from his body, and destroys it while screaming, "You are me! I was this same way." A little bit on the nose there, but the fight with Anderson ends when he dies. Literally seconds later, like one frame after Anderson dies, the next fight begins. Out of nowhere, wires fly across the battlefield as Walter takes the stage. Notice how I haven't even mentioned him since it started. You'd expect him to be around. He was called the Angel of Death. He likely would have been a big help. Well, anyway, he's here now, about 50 years younger, a vampire, and in peak fighting form. Turns out, he's been a double agent all along, which is why he's not cooler than Kato. Walter gets turned into a vampire and de-aged, because why not at this point? And we get treated to a battle between him and Alucard that's as heartbreaking as it is jaw-dropping. You just ended this massive fight with a huge climax that really sheds a lot of light on the entire thesis of Hellsing as a whole, and you're immediately flung into a betrayal fight moments later. And I'm not gonna lie, wasn't a huge fan of this. I mean, Vampire Walter is cool, we get to see him fight in his prime, plus he's a vampire, but it's so immediate. It feels like there should have been some downtime between these two battles, but as you're gonna see, that is just not the way Hellsing operates. It's not really that important to get into, but Walter has been planning this for over a decade. He was warned Richard Hellsing might try to kill Integra, and look who wasn't around when Richard tried to take over. Walter has somehow been a Millennium plant since World War II, feeding them information on Hellsing this whole time. And while all of this is going down, Integra and the newly powered up Seras decide to take the fight straight to the source. They confront the Major aboard his Zeppelin, which specifically landed to allow them to board. Everybody's favorite werecat Schrodinger is there, welcoming Integra aboard, and Integra just shoots her right in the fucking face. Like, goddamn, dude, the gloves are off. Integra is fucking pissed. The Major, in true villain fashion, monologues about his love for war, but plot twist, he's not a vampire, he's a cyborg. That's right, in a world of vampires and werewolves, this dude's biggest trick is being part iPhone. Meanwhile, Alucard and Walter are having arguably the biggest fight of the series so far. Walter is putting some serious moves on him, but there's one small issue. The fight is having major effects on his body. He was rushed into transforming into a vampire, and it was done artificially, meaning he can't hold his current form for long. Eventually, he's gonna regress, but not to an old man, to an even younger man. Benjamin Button style. To taunt Walter even more, Alucard turns into his female form. Smash. We haven't seen this form before, but apparently he used it 60-ish years ago when Walter and Alucard worked together fighting Nazis. And as they fight, Alucard begins to bring all the blood he's spent back into himself. Literal rivers and streams flowing through London begin to pull back into him, and that one moment is exactly what the Major has been waiting for. As Integra enters the Major's chamber, he instructs her to watch the giant screen as Schrodinger commits suicide, purposefully spilling his blood into the giant ocean Alucard is currently sucking back into himself. Why? Well, it's because of Schrodinger's special power. He is a self-observant being that can be anywhere and nowhere at once. As long as he's cognizant of himself, he is both everywhere and nowhere all the time. But what happens when he's dissolved into the millions of consciousness to make up Alucard's lives? Schrodinger can no longer perceive himself as himself, so instead of being everywhere and nowhere, he is simply nowhere, not alive or dead, just gone. So in an instant, Alucard disappears. We're gonna throw a big don't worry about it on this. And Integra is reasonably furious. Her unbeatable servant just got beaten, and things are looking pretty bad now. And that was all the Major was planning this entire time. This whole manga was never actually about Nazi revival or attacking Britain. All the Major wanted was to wage war against Alucard and win. Prove that he's superior against the world's mightiest force. With everything finally laid out, it's only Integra, Seras, and the Major left. Integra gives Seras the same orders as Alucard: search and destroy, kill the Major. But before she can, the entire Zeppelin they're all standing in starts to explode, from Walter using the last of his energy to smash it with his finger wires from the outside. The Major is badly injured and revealed to be a cyborg, hence why he's been alive since World War II without any change to his body. But here is where it gets even more interesting. He insists, with his dying breath, that he's still human. Now you're probably wondering why, and that's because he's got the trifecta of humanity: soul, mind, and will. And this isn't just villainous rambling at the verge of death. This is Hellsing's thesis statement delivered by the most unlikely professor, a Nazi cyborg with a hard-on for war. The Major argues that these three elements, soul, mind, and will, are what define humanity. Not flesh and blood, not a beating heart, but these intangible qualities. And then he drops the philosophical hammer on Alucard. He points out that Alucard, for all his power and apparent humanity, is still a monster. Why? Because he gave up his humanity willingly and traded it for power. The Major, twisted as he is, clung to his human soul even as his body was replaced with machinery. It is a mind-bending moment that forces us to reevaluate everything we've seen. Throughout Hellsing, we've watched Alucard champion human will, seen him admire human determination, but according to the Major, Alucard's admiration is that of an outsider looking in. He can recognize these qualities, but he can never truly reclaim them. This scene flips the script on the entire monster versus human dynamic of the series. It suggests that monstrosity isn't about physical form or even actions, but about the choices we make and the core of who we are. The Major, responsible for countless atrocities, claims humanity. Alucard, often the voice of human virtue, is labeled a monster. It is a philosophical curveball that leaves the reader questioning what truly makes us human. Is it our actions, our beliefs, our willingness to cling to our humanity even in the face of transformation, or is it something deeper, more intrinsic? But in the end, Integra pulls the trigger, ending the Major's life and his rhetoric, but the question he raises still linger, casting a shadow over Alucard's entire existence and forcing us, the audience, to grapple with his words. It is a hell of a way to cap off a series that has been gleefully blurring the lines between human and monster from page 1, and it leaves us with the unsettling idea that maybe, just maybe, the line between human and monster isn't as clear as we thought. All that said though, the story is not over. A 30-year time skip occurs. This time skip isn't just a neat bow to tie up loose ends though. It is a critical examination of the long-term consequences of the series' events and a final exploration of its themes. Integra, our iron-willed leader, is now rocking the Silver Fox look, still leading Hellsing with all the warmth of a Siberian winter, but her aging isn't just for show. It's a stark reminder of the mortality of humans in a world of immortal monsters. Integra, our bastion of human determination, is facing the one enemy she can't outwit or outrun: time. Seras, on the other hand, is fully embracing her vampire best self. Her evolution is complete, from reluctant fledgling to confident master vampire, but the Major's question still remains: has Seras managed to retain her humanity despite becoming the very thing she once fought against? We do have to remember that she became a vampire in a very different way than Alucard did. Her character arc suggests that her reluctance to trade in her humanity and finally only drinking blood as an act of love to take a person she cares about into herself would mean her humanity is still intact. But the real mic drop comes with Alucard's return. Our favorite vampire pulls a Houdini and reappears after a 30-year metaphysical timeout. He's been busy this whole time, killing the millions of souls inside of him, leaving only Schrodinger's. It's like the world's longest game of internal whack-a-mole, but now he's nowhere but can be anywhere. Same as Schrodinger used to be. Alucard's return is more than just a crowd-pleasing moment, it's the culmination of his character arc. He spent centuries as a monster, then decades admiring humanity, and now he's back, but is he the same? Has his time away, ironically spent killing parts of himself, made him more human, or is he now more monstrous than ever? The reunion between him and Integra is charged with unresolved tension. Integra, aged and mortal, faces the eternally youthful Alucard. It is a visual representation of the series' ongoing debate about humanity versus immortality. Integra offers Alucard her blood, a gesture loaded with symbolism. Is it an acceptance of her mortality, a final union of human and monster, or a recognition that the line between the two was always blurrier than we thought? I don't know, because in the end, Hellsing doesn't give us any neat answers. Instead, it just leaves us with a lot of questions, as most manga and anime are wont to do. When you take out all the metaphors, the real question is the inner darkness that humans have, is that ever truly going to come to an end? The time skip shows us the irrelevance of time on that question. I think it's more a statement about how no matter what, this is always going to be a battle and it's never really going to end. Is being human about winning the war? Is it about fighting the war? Is it about choosing peace? But I think the final message of Hellsing is this. The line between human and monster isn't etched into biology or lifespan. Instead, it's all about our choices, our willpower, the things that we do, the things that we say, the way that we say them, who we say them to. Your humanity is constantly being tested, and how you live up to that test is going to determine whether you're a monster or not. And that, my friends, is the insane story of Hellsing. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Mike, this is Bonsai Pop, and I'll catch you next time.